when did you know, and why was it important that it be your father?
Well, I think it's loud. I think for me it was an easy choice. My dad, well, really, my mom and my dad have been the best role models, the best example. They provided so much for my two brothers and I, that from how to treat people to how to work hard, how to take ownership from making mistakes to sacrificing for us. We never needed anything growing up, and we never needed to look too far for how to do things. You know, my mom and dad were about as consistent of parents as you can get, and they did everything in their power to provide us the opportunity to have success. And so when that situation came up, it was kind of, if I didn't do my mom or my dad, then I was probably doing the wrong thing. So it was probably the easiest decision that I've had to make the last 6 months.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hey, Luke, to your left, Chris Lee from WRAL in Raleigh, North Carolina. While you're not the first Carolina Panther to go into the Hall of Fame, you are the only Carolina Panther to have only played your career with the Panthers there in the Hall of Fame. You're still involved in Charlotte and in the community, and also with coaching and just different things that you do. What has the Carolinas meant to you throughout your playing career, but even now after your playing career, to get you here to the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I don't think it could have ended up in a better situation that I was in Carolina. I think from the organization to, you know, Marty and Ron and Sean McDermott, the defensive coordinator, to the community in general, I think they welcomed me to the Carolinas. They welcomed me to the Carolina Panthers, and there's been nothing but support from the community since I got there, whether it was when I first got there as a rookie, or I was in year 4, or after, you know, we went to the Super Bowl, or whether it was we were having a bad season. Regardless of the situation, you'd see people out and about, and everybody was always so supportive, and you just felt comfortable. You felt like you were in a safe space, and it was a really special place for me to end up. And then, you know, when I finished playing a couple years ago, even now moving forward, the city of Charlotte and the Carolinas in general have given me every opportunity that I could have ever wanted to stay involved in the community and stay involved in the game of football. From, you know, Dave and Nicole Tepper giving me the opportunity to work in the radio booth, or, you know, everybody knows that Greg and Stu and I coach over at Charlotte Christian, have the opportunity to do that, to, you know, the support from all the people from the Carolina Panthers that are here today. I just think it's a place where I came as a 21-year-old kid, and they wrapped their arms around me and gave me an opportunity to enjoy a game that I love and live a childhood dream. Yep.
Luke, Nick Carboni from WCNC. Congratulations. I wonder, you know, being here in Canton, I think you visited this museum as a kid. I think you played it on this field. As you reflect on everything from that point to this point, what do you think of?
Darren Gant wrote a lot of good articles on all the information. All the information's in there. You know, this is a really cool place. You know, the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio is special to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, I'm from Cincinnati. And I've been here multiple times throughout my career. You know, I came here, like you said, when I was a little kid in grade school, and we came up, and I walked through these buildings and saw, you know, Super Bowl rings and jerseys and old cleats and gloves, and, you know, you think maybe one day I can play in the NFL, one day I can play in high school, one day I can play in college. You never think in a million years that you'd be sitting up here doing this. And then when I was, I don't know if I was in 8th grade or in high school or at some point, I came up and watched a state championship game. And then my freshman year in high school at St. Xavier, we came, and the St. Xavier Bombers played Massillon in the state championship game out at, it was Fawcett Field, I know it's Benson Field now. And then as a junior in high school, we played up here in the state championship game. And now, you know, we're here now. It's kind of a full circle experience on my football career, and it's a special place for a lot of reasons. I love the game of football and the history behind it, and it's given me so many opportunities, and to be here now is really cool.
Thanks.
Hey, Luke, Pat Welter from WRAL in Raleigh. You're notorious for your game prep and your film work, and there's a notebook right now of yours in the Hall of Fame that gives some insight into it. Do you remember that specific notebook and what they chose? And can you give us some insight into why you were so obsessive with your prep?
Well, I think, you always try to find advantages that happen before Sunday, right? So can I prepare in practice? Can I prepare in meeting rooms? Can I prepare in the off season and make sure that my body's ready to roll for games? And you look for those advantages, and then some of them work, some of them don't work. But some of them that worked really well for me was the ability to prepare and ability to watch tape and anticipate. And I think a lot of that started at St. Xavier High School with Steve Specht. We used to watch VHS tape with Specht in his office eating lunch, and then on the Boston College, I watched a lot of tape with a guy named Wes Davis, and you start to see the advantage of, hey, I've seen this in a previous game, and you can put yourself in that situation. So if it's, these guys are on the field, it's 3rd and 7, here's their top 4 pass concepts, here's what we might be on defense, how do we match up against it? And then you can kind of play through that scenario in your mind before the ball gets snapped, and then when you kind of turn around and the ball gets snapped during the games, I've sat next to Thomas for 20 hours that week talking about this route against Drew Brees and the Saints, and we're in this coverage, how do we want to do it? And the ball gets snapped and they run that route and we're in this coverage, and we've already talked about it. And I think everybody does things different ways, but I think the best thing for me and how I remember things is I vocalize them and I write them down. And the more I write stuff down and the more I talk about it, the more I remember it. So I think a lot of it for me was when I would watch stuff and prepare in meetings, our coaches always did a great job of talking through situational football and what to expect and how they're going to attack us and their top concepts. And I would remember all of that by writing it down. And I think that was the advantage of the notebook for me, was I had a system that worked for me. And like I said, the more I talked about it and the more I wrote it down with my hand, the more I remembered it.
Hey Luke, first of all, congratulations. Ben with 10K Sports Talk Radio Minneapolis. You've always been regarded as one of the smartest players on the field while playing. Recently you came out saying when being too smart sucks and you overthought the salt and pepper play call.
Yeah.
Has there been any other play call or scheme that has just confused you while playing?
We played Atlanta. I don't remember when it was. It was probably I want to say it was 2018. And they had run a run play the previous couple weeks out of a formation and a personnel grouping and kind of an area on the field. And I was like, we're going to get this run. This run traditionally gives me problems. And they had a really good center, Alex Mack. So it was kind of a perfect storm of, I've seen it multiple weeks in a row. I understand the formation. We're going to be lined up very similarly to the team that they were playing. And I was sitting on this play all game, and they probably lined up in that formation 6, 7, 8 times during that game, and they never ran that run play one time. And I remember towards the end of the game, the official actually came up to me and he kind of asked, like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "You look like you're waiting for something that's not coming." And I said, "You know what? I'm glad you said that to me, because I knew something was a little bit off today." And I had sat on a run play the whole game and they never ran it. I remember telling him that, and I remember after the game I kept telling myself that, hey, your job is to anticipate, but at the end of the day, your job is to react to what goes on, right? I can't wish Matt Ryan to run this run play during the game, because they're gonna do whatever they want. So I gotta line up, I gotta do my job, I gotta have my eyes in the right place. I can anticipate, I can feel, I can lean, but when the ball gets snapped, I gotta go to where do I need to go. And that happened multiple times throughout my career, but that was one that sticks out to me right now, was against Atlanta at home. They lined up in this one formation and they never ran this run play one time. And I remember the official came up to me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And he explained to me why he asked, and it made a lot of sense to me, because I was kind of feeling the same thing.
Hey Luke, myself amongst a lot of my buddies growing up, grew up on that 15-1 2015 Panthers team. Just in your opinion, what made that team so special, and just how fun was it to be a part of that team with guys like Cam Newton and all those guys that made that run to the Super Bowl?
I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about as far as what made that team special, but I think the people and the guys and the relationships on that team was what made it special. And what I mean by that is we had really good older veteran guys that were our best players. So Greg and Ryan and Thomas and Stu and Charles Johnson, and Cam was getting up there going, I think Cam was in year 5. Our best players were our best leaders. The way they practiced, the way they played, the way they prepared. But our best players and our best leaders, Greg and Ryan and Stu and Cam and Chuck and TD, were also great people and formed relationships with guys on teams and kept everything light and fun and enjoyable. And then what we did that I thought was really good is we added some really good pieces. You know, you added Charles Tillman. I mean, the best dude in the world that could still play. Roman Harper, Kurt Coleman. We brought Luke Kuechly, and so we brought all these older veteran guys in that came into our locker room and were like, these dudes are awesome, because the stage and the culture that those guys set that I initially talked about. So between the guys that were there for a long time, the Gregs and Ryans and Stews and Cams and TD and all those guys, we had a great veteran leaders right there. And then the guys that we introduced that off season with, Roman, and Roman was there the year before, but Kurt and Peanut, we brought Jared Allen in. Our older guys in that team set the tone for what was acceptable, what was fun, how to have fun. And Ron did a really good job of letting us be ourselves. He had a great feel for the room. He had a great feel for the team. He did a really good job of kind of creating like a box that was always moving, but as long as we stayed in the box, we were okay. And he let us be ourselves. And there was no one was rushing to get out of there during the week. Everybody wanted to stay and hang out, and guys would watch tape, guys would lift, guys would watch tape together, guys would screw around in the locker room and have a great time. And we had great people that loved being around each other, and Cam Newton was awesome that year, won the MVP. So we had a coach that understood his players, and we had players that understood the mission of our coaches giving us an opportunity to kind of run the team we want. We have to have respect for that and do it the right way.
Hey, Luke, I'm Josh Weinfuss with ESPN. Did the fear of CTE contribute to you walking away when you did, and then is it still a concern at all now?
No.
To both?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Antonio Rossetti, West Hills Gazette. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, you guys played the Cardinals in the playoffs against Larry Fitz. You guys, and obviously you played Drew Brees. What's it mean for you to be able to get inducted after playing against them?
I think it's cool for a lot of reasons. You look at this class, right, and the having the opportunity to play against Drew has been phenomenal. Inside the division twice a year. We played him once in the playoffs. Him and I have such a fun competitive history together. He's the best player that I've ever played against, and to have the opportunity to end my career, my last game I ever played was at Bank of America Stadium against Drew. So to get in with Drew is unbelievable. A guy I watched since I was a little kid, and have the opportunity to play against him and be here now with him is phenomenal. The same thing with Larry. My first game against Larry was down in the desert in 2013, my second year, and we played down there. They played up against us. We played on playoff games, and Larry and I have found ourselves in a lot of the same rooms and situations, and throughout my whole career. So it's cool to go in with guys that, number one, you play against, and then number two, that you've spent a lot of time together with. And same thing with Adam. I grew up watching the Colts, being from Cincinnati, and watching Adam, and the career that he had not only with the Colts but in New England was phenomenal. And the consistency that he had it's amazing. And then Roger, and you learn a lot about what kind of teammate guys are, and all the guys from that 49ers team have always, you talk to a bunch of them throughout this process, and they talk about that team didn't go without Roger and what he was able to do, not only on the ground, but, obviously it's well documented. Roger's the first guy to go 1,000. So his opportunities that he provided for, Jerry and, all those guys was fantastic, and his joy that him and his family have. And if you watch all those knock episodes, you watch, those guys knock on that door for him, and how excited. Obviously Roger was beyond excited, but those guys were more excited than he was that he was getting in, and that just shows you everything about the type of teammate that he was.
Hey, Michael Houlihan, WZIP, University of Akron. Congratulations, Luke. Just want to talk about some of those NFC South battles. One of them was a singular play against another guy who looks like he's going to be in the Hall of Fame soon, Julio Jones.
Yeah.
How did you get matched up on Julio Jones on
Dang,
that one play on
you
that
guys
deep
are
left?
throwing daggers, man.
Was that broken coverage, or were you designed
Dang,
to guard
man.
the best receiver in the league down there, or what happened there?
What happened there?
Yeah.
It was quarters, and they went to empty. And when you go quarters to empty, I got the guy down the middle of the field, and so I had to run with Julio down the field. And Matt, fortunately for Julio, saw that and decided that he liked his matchup down the field a little bit more than I liked the matchup down the field. And obviously, since you asked the question, you know what the result was, and it was a win for the Atlanta Falcons and Julio Jones.
Thanks, Luke.
Hey, Luke. Congratulations, Corey Kuffler at WQAD. You just answered a lot of what I wanted to know about Roger, but with him being in that West Coast offense and taking advantage of linebackers, you being a linebacker, would you have liked to have played against him?
I think the competitor inside you always wants to play against the best, and I think it's kind of cool. Roger was a little bit before his time in that aspect, and you look around the NFL now, there's a lot of guys that, whether or not they wanna believe it, their game mimics what Roger does. You know, you look at, obviously Christian in San Francisco. It's actually really cool. I've had the opportunity to play with Christian, and in his career has been unbelievable. A guy that can beat you on the ground and in the air. And you look at a couple of the best guys in the NFL right now with Bijan Robinson. He can do everything, and Jahmyr Gibbs, same thing. And those guys are looked at now as the cream of the crop. But the guy that started that first was Roger. So, as the competitor in you, you would love to have the opportunity to play against him. But those guys, especially when Roger was playing the size that he was, you don't want those guys anywhere near you in space. And so maybe it's better I got to hear about the tales of Roger Craig rather than playing against him.
Hi, Luke. Jen Lewis, 3 Chicks in a Pod and New Stitched Media. So my first question for you is going to be, how does it feel to be the first player from Boston College in 57 years to be inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's Ernie Stautner and Art Donovan, I think, are the other two defensive guys. So no, it's really cool, and I think I owe a lot of my career to what I learned at BC from, I think, really how the game was played up there. With when I got up there, is very similar to when I got to Carolina. The standard for how to play the game was already set. The two guys that were in that room were Mike McLaughlin and Mark Herzlich, and I talked about this guy a lot. His name's Wes Davis. He played safety for us when I was there for, I think it was 2 years. Wes was a couple years older than I was, but I walked into that linebacking room, and the position coach his name was Bill McGovern, and he'd been coaching forever, a Jersey guy, and he was tough and a great coach and loved the game of football and would coach you, which I think is phenomenal. But the other thing that he did that I think is even more important than all of that was he formed such great relationships with the guys in the team, and he cared and loved about all of them. And so you see, on one side, here's this guy that you can clearly tell that he loves the game of football. He loves to coach. He's smart. He's passionate, and he will coach you, which I think I always wanted that. But then on the other side of it, it wasn't a one-way street. It was, I'm going to get on you and I'm going to coach you, but then I'm also going to form a relationship where you know that I care about you. So I think that was one thing that I learned moving forward, that I took with me, that I learned at St. Xavier with Steve Specht and a lot of guys. But you see the value of the relationship side of the game. And then you looked at, Mark Herzlich and Mike McLaughlin were the older guys in our room that had tons of success and were really good players, all ACC, all American, the whole nine. And they were willing to help young guys and talk to young guys and mentor young guys and coach them up. And, hey, this is how we do it, and this is why. And, hey, try this, not that. And then they also set a really good standard for how things were done on the field. So, you got there and you always watched the older guys and how do the older guys do things. And Mike McLaughlin, we called him Mac, was full speed and gave great effort and was tough and physical and worked his butt off in the weight room and was a great dude. So you walk in, and the same thing, hers was the same way. So you walk in the room and your position coach, Govs, was awesome. And then you watch these two guys and you watch them on the field, in the meeting rooms, in the classroom, out at school, in the weight room. It's like, all right, well, if I want to have success, I want to be like those guys. And then I've talked a lot about Wes. He wasn't in our room, he was the room next to us. He taught me the value of watching tape and how to watch it and why to watch it and why to watch it with other people and the value of that. And so I think when I got to BC, you learn, toughness, intensity, passion, love for the game, understanding of the game, how to form relationships, the value of preparation and working together as a group. And I mean, how much time you got? I could keep going on what I learned from, and I think the Jesuit leaning at BC that helped a lot too. Just a place where love and respect and treating people the right way and doing things the right way and how you treat people is really, at the end of the day, the most important thing. I think that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I learned at BC.
Thank you.
Hey, Luke.
What's up, Scott?
How are you?
Good.
You got to personalize your Hall of Fame exhibit with some things that were special
Yeah.
to you. And I wonder if you could go through a few of those
Yeah.
things in your mind and why you chose those exact things.
All right, so let's see here. So I got my helmet, I got my shoulder pads. That's pretty straightforward. The gloves. Okay, so here's something interesting, Scott. Would be the cleats that I wore. I remember when I came in from BC, we were a Reebok school, and then we were an Under Armour school. So then you get to Carolina, and they have you go to the equipment room, and there's 15 pairs of cleats that you can choose from, and it was like playland. So I tried a couple of different pairs, and I finally settled on the ones that I really liked, and that I wore the same model of cleat from, not the same cleat, but the same model of cleat from the first game I ever played in Carolina to the last game that I ever played in Carolina. So, people, you can say that you're superstitious, or maybe I'm anal, or I just liked how they felt, or they were comfortable. I don't know what it was, but I felt like the cleat that I wore my whole career in Carolina deserved to be there. I think my shoulder pads were next to your helmet. I think that's your most important thing. I think the notebook that I put in there is obviously that was my prized possession during the week. And it's funny when you read through that notebook, because sometimes you write things down in there that you write down all the the plays and formations and all that stuff, but sometimes you write down how you're gonna approach the game. And I think one of the things I wrote down in that notebook was I was on a bad streak of being very frustrated about something. I don't remember what it was, but I wrote in there, relax, have fun. And there were other things that I wrote in that book and books throughout my career that you wonder, and it takes you back to that moment of, we were playing this team in this moment. I wrote like be a good teammate, relax, have fun, communicate, and get excited for people. And it takes you back to those moments of, what was I thinking about? Why was I saying that? And then it kind of jogs your memory, and boom, this is the reason why. So I had that. I think I had a football in there. Was it from the Thanksgiving game, Scott? Do you have it all written down? I think, I know. The collar, yeah, that. So the football, I think, was from the Thanksgiving game. I just remember how fun that game was and how fun that season was. In those blues, that was the first time we wore the blue jerseys. I think I put a black jersey in there. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. That was always one of my favorite jerseys was a black jersey, because you guys know, you and Joe know, that as the season went on, we would never wear black in the beginning of the year, because you'd be delusional to wear a black jersey in the South early in the season for home games, right? But as the season would go on, the grass would change. I think it would go from Bermuda to, I think it was I think it was ryegrass they put, so you could start to see the change in the grass. And then, Joe's laughing at me because I'm nerding out, but the grass would start to change. Dennis, our ground crew guy, was the man. And then as the grass would change, the weather would cool off, and then we'd switch from white jerseys to black jerseys. I think it was a black jersey, or maybe whatever, but it felt like playoff football, because it was like November, December, and cold, and it just felt like football. So there was that, and I'm sure there's some other things in there I'm missing. So.
Hey, Luke. Good to see you. Cam is a guy who will be eligible here next year.
Wow, is he really?
I'd be curious to hear, one, about his candidacy, but also maybe a specific example like you shared about that Atlanta game in 19 or 18, about a time or place where he made you better.
Oh, Cam, when he made me, let me think. Okay, we'll start with the first part of your question. I think you look at Cam, and when Cam was on the field, he was the best player on the field. He was the biggest, most physically dominant person on the field, and we used to walk out. I remember when we'd play, you play NFC teams, especially inside the division, they know who Cam is. But when you would go play AFC games and AFC teams, and they would come in, or we'd go there, and we'd walk out for the coin toss, you could see the faces of the guys walking out like, oh my gosh, he's gigantic. And I felt like he got bigger on game days because, obviously he had his shoulder pads on, and later in his career at practice, he would just wear these like little shell things during practice. So then the only time he'd really have his pads on would be during games. He wore these big rib protectors. He had these like shin guards on, these like foam shin guards, and he was the biggest person on the field, and then he was dominant. And he could run past guys, through guys, around guys, jump over guys. He could throw the ball anywhere on the field, and when he was at his best, he was the best player on the field at all times. So I think, you look at, if I'm a team and I'm defending the Carolina Panthers, there's two guys that you have to worry about. I think, first of all, is Greg Olsen, because he can do everything. He can line up in the slot, he can put his hand in the ground, he can block anyone, he can run receiver routes, front side, back side, in the slot, and then Cam. Those are the two guys, and I think when you specifically have to game plan for guys, I think that tells the story for what it is. How do we get an extra guy in the box? How do we get a free runner at Cam? Hey, how do we cloud his vision so he can't throw the ball to Greg? I think that kind of speaks for itself. But I think, how did Cam make you better? I think in practice and in training camp, you think a lot about, hey, who are your matchups during training camp? And one guy was Ryan Khalil at the center position, Stu, and then a lot of the time we spent in the passing game there was two guys, Cam and Greg, and to have the opportunity to play against Cam as much as I did during training camp and in practice, and to have the opportunity to play against Greg as much as I did in training camp and in practice, both of those guys, there's nothing they couldn't do. And I think Greg, I'm getting on Greg now, but Greg had a ton of pride in, I'll put my hand on the ground, I'll block some of these monster defensive ends, or you can split me out wide and I can run routes and beat DBs. And Cam was the same way. How do you want me to beat you? And I think that was one thing that I had the luxury of with in Carolina, was the dudes that I'd spent most of my time practicing against were some of the best players in the NFL.
Hey, Luke, congratulations. Mike K.
What's up, Mike?
Charlotte. Hey, how are you? Have you thought about how much the current connective tissue that you have to this organization can impact this current iteration of the team? I mean, watching film with Trevin, JJ is still playing, obviously.
Well, JJ's had more of an impact on me, which we can get to that.
We can get into that.
There we go.
I'm down for that conversation. But have you thought about there are guys who are going to make their debuts tonight in the NFL because you were in the Hall of Fame right now this weekend. I mean, Jackson Kuwach grew up watching you.
Yeah, Cincinnati guy.
Yeah, so have you thought about how much your legacy kind of impacts the current iteration of the Panthers?
Well, I think the way you kind of started the question was how involved I still am with the team, and I think a lot of that goes to Dave and Nicole Tepper for giving me the opportunity not only to, I do the radio, which is awesome. Jake and Anish and I and David Langdon, they're the best. We've got a great crew, but my ability to just come into the stadium and walk around and, go see the guys in the equipment room, or, go upstairs and see Dan and Brant and, Coach Canales and all those guys. It's an open door, and I don't know if it's like that everywhere. Obviously, this is the only place that I ever played, but the ability that Dave and Nicole have given me to stay involved and be around and come in whenever I want and be a phone call away. I think, I'm sure, these guys are so excited to play tonight, but I think more than anything, I'm just very fortunate to have had an organization that Mr. Richardson drafted me, and now the Teppers are here now, and I feel like they've welcomed me with open arms, both families, and given me every opportunity that I've ever could have asked for to, number one, play the game, but now be involved with the team as I am now. I couldn't ask for a better situation, and I'm going to be standing on the field tonight, super jealous that those guys get to run around and go play football in the Carolina Panthers jersey. So.